I ultimately have to look at these videos as me selling myself on my own ideas in a harder way so that I implement them with more tenacity. Because if I look at this as just revealing all of my greatest training secrets, it's very depressing. In some way, it's like, I'm like, oh God, someone could just go on here and watch all my videos and figure out everything I do, and then they could replace me like a changeling. Like I said, I'm really paranoid. I've talked about this. So without further ado, it's kind of pointless to train jiu-jitsu predominantly in a time limit fashion, because jiu-jitsu itself is an emergent property of no time limit grappling. Really, I mean, like, wrestling is the epitome of time limit based grappling. Like, freestyle wrestling is the epitome of time limit based grappling. Just how much exposure can I create in your form in this short time frame? But jiu-jitsu is, again, how can I control you in a manner that leads to submission? Control takes time to be expressed. Control is, by definition, time-based, whereas exposure is a time-neutral activity. To create exposure is simply opportunity, and opportunity is not time-based. Opportunity is positional. So if I can just open positions in ways that are novel, then I've created opportunity. But to exploit those openings requires control, and that is the ability to prolong exposure positionally, which is the thing that jiu-jitsu does. So if you're training jiu-jitsu in a very low time limit manner, like you're using time limits, you're really not training jiu-jitsu, you're training some form of catch wrestling. Actually, you're actually training like catch wrestling, I believe. You even catch wrestling in the gi, or like submission judo or something. But again, though I guess judo itself is also no time limit based. It's the same as Mongolian wrestling as well. Mongolian wrestling is no time limit based. And I think that grappling sports and striking sports in general should be no time limit based. I mean, what is this time limit crap that goes on? Like, if we're boxing and I can create a system of boxing that makes you use energy in a manner that in 5 minutes you're going to be unable to lift your hands, then why can't I implement that? Because the rounds are 3 minutes. So now I can't. It's so dumb. It's like the whole essence of combat to me, above like sport, is the reality of it. Like the fact that we can take a combat sport and we can actually have people compete in that combat sport rather than just going to war. Like, it's like, because again, like, you make it becomes sport. It becomes training attributes in order to gamify a system when you train with a time limit. Now, if you compete with a time limit, there's a little bit of a difference there, because competition does, in some sense, have a time limit. I mean, I like that NESF, the gym I trained at in Amherst, they had a no time limit rule in training. Like, there was just no time limit. Like, he would just stay there and keep the lights on just until there was a submission. So you knew, like, you were getting submitted or you were submitting. Like, there was no hiding. There was no like, it's the end of the round, buddy. Guess you lasted this time. It was just someone laying on top of you, using absolutely no energy, just waiting for you. You had to escape, which would create openings. Or you could just wait until it was too exhausting to continue breathing with someone on top of you. Like, it just becomes retarded. It's like a nature documentary where, like, the anaconda is just like waiting for you just to misstep. It's like, this could be 12 seconds, 12 minutes, 12 hours, or 12 years, but you're gonna die. It's just this, it's terrifying. And that creates real awareness of the conditions of combat. Because you're like, if nothing else happened, like, the whole point of training is to isolate variables. And if you're not isolating the variable of what happens when nothing steps in, what's the point? I mean, you might as well train with knives, train with people coming in and kicking you. Like, I do not understand where the time limit comes in martial arts training. I think wrestling rooms would benefit from having no time limit. Like, let's just see if you can pin someone without a time limit. Like, let's just see how long you can actually hold off the cradle. I think the majority of training should be done with no time limit. And then you should adapt the principles discovered in no time limit training, like I talked about in like jiu-jitsu is just an excuse for me to beat you up with physics. You uncover those principles in no time limit training, and then you adapt them to the time limit in a way that works. But you can't discover the principles in the time limit setting because the principles, because it's not isolated. You're not isolating the experiment. There's too many variables. There's the time limit variable, and there's the physiological and positional and physics conditions that you're dealing with in the combat sport. You can't isolate the variable of those conditions and have a time limit because the time limit is itself another variable. It's simply necessary to train in all combat sports in a primarily no time limit based setting so that you can actually see the success and failure of certain principles taken to their logical extremes. This training can then be adapted to time limit, no time limit, weapons, multiple attackers, etc., because you have truly isolated the variable of what works and what does not work. I think that both are necessary, but I think that training as though the round ending without a submission or without some sort of TKO, like you shouldn't actually have to TKO someone in boxing. You should simply understand what leads to TKO. And once that starts happening, you're like, okay, yeah, it's just inevitable I'm going to win because, again, we've taken it this far in sparring again. And we just know that once it gets to this point, there's just going to be a knockout or a TKO. And this is what, then you wouldn't have random knockouts in sparring either. Because, I mean, again, maybe striking doesn't lend itself as much to this because striking is more variables. I don't really know. I'm not an expert striker, but I think striking would lend itself to this as well. I mean, there's also this trend throughout history of striking being replaced by grappling, like Odysseus' supremacy over Laodamas the boxer in the Odyssey. Like, the Phaeacians had their chief boxer, Laodamas, and Odysseus kind of through his crafty ways implies that he would rip everyone a new one, but he won't fight Laodamas because Laodamas is his host. And it's kind of this moment in history where you see boxing kind of give way to wrestling, I believe. And then wrestling, I think, has given way to jiu-jitsu because, again, that ability to create opportunity, while important, it must be exploited. And now that we have a society that is very inculcated in wrestling and understands the positional game, now we get into the control-based game. Now we're not players, we're puppeteers. And you need to have no time limits in order to really understand the art of being a puppet master. That is all.